The morning after my wedding, I woke up next to a man whose last name I had just taken, and I had absolutely no idea what his favorite color was. No idea what made him laugh. No idea what kept him up at night. What I did know. He made the best cola chicken wings I had ever tasted in my life. And somehow that tiny, ridiculous detail was the beginning of everything. People talk about falling in love like it's this one giant moment. Like lightning hits you and suddenly everything is clear and beautiful and perfect. But nobody ever talks about the other kind of love. The slow kind. The kind that sneaks up on you so quietly you don't even notice it happening until one day you look at the person sitting across from you at the breakfast table and you think, oh no. When did this happen? That's my story. My name is Celeste. And I married a stranger. I was not a girl who did obvious things. I didn't walk up to boys I liked and introduce myself. That wasn't me. So instead, I did what any completely normal, not at all obsessive 17-year-old girl does. I baked breakfast for him every morning and had my friend Valeria deliver it. I wrote him letters. Real letters, with actual words about actual feelings, signed, and this is where it all went wrong, signed by Valeria, because I asked her to deliver them, and she apparently had a very creative interpretation of the word deliver. He thought Valeria liked him. He kept those letters for years. Years. In a box. At his parents' house. I found this out much, much later, and I want you to understand, the level of chaos that single piece of information caused in my life was extraordinary. But I'm getting ahead of myself. She was not wrong. I was 26 years old, running on caffeine and ambition, and the only man in my life was whatever fictional character I happened to be reading about that week. And then my father called. He had to leave his university position temporarily, some family business that needed his attention back home. And because the universe apparently has a very specific sense of humor, the university needed a replacement physics teacher for the senior students. My father suggested me. I said absolutely not. My father mentioned the name of the university. I said, when do I start? Because it was Cashin's university. Now before you call me unhinged, and look, I understand if you do, I want to clarify something. I was not planning anything dramatic. I was not going to show up and announce my feelings and make a spectacle of myself. I had made peace with the fact that Cashin had no idea I existed. I genuinely just wanted to see him one more time. See how he turned out. See if the boy who used to sketch in his notebook margins had grown into someone wonderful. And then I walked into the classroom on my first day, set my things down on the podium, looked out at 40-something students, and heard a voice from the back of the room shout, loud enough for the entire universe to hear. Wife. Let me explain the wife thing. 3 weeks before I started teaching, I had gone through the most humiliating experience of my professional life at a conference in the southern city. Long story short, I needed a +1 for a formal dinner, my friends were unavailable, and I made a very impulsive decision involving a very handsome stranger I met in a hotel lobby. That stranger was Cashin. He had the most irritating look of complete calm about him, like nothing in the world could genuinely bother him. I walked up to him, explained the situation with the kind of directness that I now recognize was slightly terrifying, and asked if he would accompany me to the dinner. He looked at me for a very long moment. Then he said, and I am quoting directly, sure. For the free food. We went to the dinner. We talked. We ate. We talked some more. Something about the way he spoke, thoughtful, unhurried, never trying to impress anyone, made me feel like I had accidentally walked into a room I hadn't realized I'd been looking for. By the end of the night, I had made another impulsive decision. A considerably more impulsive decision. I told him I thought we should get married. He looked at me for another very long moment. Then he said, "You're serious?" I said, "I'm always serious." He was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then, okay. That was it. That was our proposal. Two people in a hotel lobby, one of whom had been quietly in love for nearly a decade, the other of whom was primarily motivated by what I can only describe as a very calm sense of curiosity about where this was going. We got our marriage certificate the next morning. He texted me his address. I texted him mine. We went home to our separate lives, and I spent the next 3 weeks alternating between the most ridiculous happiness and the most overwhelming terror that I had absolutely made a mistake of catastrophic proportions. And then I walked into his classroom, and he yelled "wife" at me in front of 40-something students. So yes, that was how my flash marriage husband became my student. Here is what I knew about Cashin by the end of that first week. He was smart, but deeply, passionately uninterested in physics. He had not completed a single page of his summer homework. He had a best friend named Lucian who treated chaos like a love language. He sketched during lectures still, after all these years, and when he actually paid attention in class his answers were so precise and clear it was almost annoying. And he was angry at me. Genuinely, legitimately angry. Because I had watched him gloat the day before about escaping his physics homework due to my father's departure. I had sat there listening to him say with such relief and joy that the disappointment of a daughter had saved him from suffering, not knowing that the disappointment of a daughter was me, sitting right there, eating her own cooking and watching the whole thing unfold. When I told him the homework was still due and that he specifically was facing an 80% grade deduction, you should have seen his face. He did not immediately know what to do with the combination of emotions. I could see them rotating through him like slides in a presentation. Disbelief. Outrage. The dawning realization that he absolutely could not call his teacher his wife in public. More outrage. That night at home, he locked himself in the master bedroom and put a pillow and blanket outside on the guest room bed. For me, he kicked his own wife out of the master bedroom. I stood in the hallway looking at that pillow and thought, this is going to be an interesting year. He came around eventually. He always came around. That was the thing about Cashin. He would plant his flag in the ground and declare war, and then quietly, stubbornly, never actually follow through on any of his dramatic declarations. He locked me out of the bedroom and then an hour later cracked the door open because I mentioned I bought barbecue on the way home. All his favorite things. Lamb skewers, pork belly. The man could not sustain his own anger. It was possibly the most endearing thing about him. Though I would not have admitted that at the time. Living with someone changes everything. Not in the ways you expect. You expect the big things to be difficult, the shared space, the different schedules, the way two people's lives have to negotiate around each other. And yes, all of that takes adjustment. But what I didn't expect was how much you learn from the small things. I learned that Cashin ate breakfast like it was a sacred ritual. Slow, deliberate, reading something on his phone while he chewed. Never rushed, no matter how late it was getting. I learned that when he was stuck on a design project, he would pace the studio in very precise circles, not even noticing he was doing it. Until eventually he stopped and went to look out the window for exactly 3 minutes, and then came back and started drawing. I learned that he could not hold on to his own anger for longer than one meal's worth of time. Something about eating together diffused everything. Every single fight we had, we talked it through over food. I don't know if he knew he was doing it. I'm not sure I knew I was doing it either. I learned that he had kept letters in a box at his parents' house for years. That one hit me somewhere I wasn't prepared for. He didn't know those letters were from me. He thought they were from Valeria. He had told me about it like it was a slightly awkward memory from his teenage years, some girl who had liked him. He had kept her letters because he was soft-hearted about things like that. He was going to burn them eventually. I let him talk. I watched his face while he talked about those letters. The way his voice got slightly quieter, not sad exactly, but careful. Like the memory still meant something even if he couldn't fully explain why. I didn't tell him right away that they were mine. Maybe I should have. But I wanted him to find out the way people find out things that matter, not because someone dumped the information on them, but at the right moment, in the right way. Besides, part of me was terrified. Because this man who had no idea he had been loved from a distance for almost 10 years was sitting in my kitchen eating the breakfast I had cooked, sketching in his notebook, and telling me about letters that were mine, and looking completely, impossibly at ease. And I was realizing, somewhere around week 4 of our cohabitation, that the feelings I had carried quietly for 9 years had not faded the way I had always assumed they would once I actually got close to him. They had gotten worse. Worse in the best possible way. Heavier and more real, with texture and detail that a teenage crush from across a hallway could never have. I was completely in trouble. There's a specific moment I think about when I try to explain how I knew. It wasn't anything grand. It wasn't a dramatic declaration or a romantic gesture or one of those cinematic moments people describe when they talk about falling in love. It was a Tuesday. I had been in the lab until almost 9 at night. I hadn't eaten since noon. I came home to find the house dark on the first floor, and then I saw the light coming from under the studio door. Cashin was inside, still working. He had drawn for 6 straight hours on a design he couldn't get right. There were crumpled papers across the floor. He had a specific expression on his face, not frustrated exactly, more like he was in an argument with the drawing and refusing to admit defeat. He looked up when I came in. Just looked up, didn't say anything. Then, "You haven't eaten." It wasn't a question. It was a fact he had noticed and decided to do something about. He got up, went to the kitchen, and made me noodles. Simple, quick, exactly the way I liked them. He brought them to the studio instead of making me come to the table, because he could tell I was tired. He sat back down at his own drawing while I ate, not making a thing of it, not expecting anything in return. That was it. That was the moment. I had been loved by this man in small, consistent, completely undramatic ways for months, and I had been so focused on whether he knew about my feelings that I had almost missed the fact that something was already there. Something that didn't need grand announcements or perfect timing. Something that had been building, quietly, every single day. He found out about the letters on a Friday night. We had been at a bar with my university friends, Arya and Camille and Valeria had done what Valeria does best, which is create chaos while maintaining complete plausible deniability. She had brought up the fact that we had attended the same high school. Cashin's face had done that thing it does when he's processing something unexpected, very still, very careful. When we got home, he told me about his crush. On Valeria. On the girl he thought had sent him breakfast and written him letters for months when he was 17. He was embarrassed about it. He kept saying he was young, he didn't know, he was going to burn those letters. His ears had gone red the way they do when he's genuinely uncomfortable. I waited until he finished talking. Then I told him that the person who sent the breakfast every morning was me. The letters were mine. I had just asked Valeria to deliver them, and she had apparently decided her own name looked better at the bottom. The silence was approximately 4 seconds long. Then, "You're telling me I spent 9 years keeping letters from my own wife?" I tried very hard not to laugh. He stared at me for a moment with an expression I could not fully read. Something between completely overwhelmed and the kind of moved that doesn't have a good word for it. Then he turned around, walked upstairs, locked himself in the bedroom, and from behind the door I heard, "I need a minute." "Take your time," I said. A pause. Then, "They were really good letters, Celeste." And that somehow was better than any declaration I had ever imagined receiving. He won a gold award at his design competition with a painting of the two of us at the lake. He told me about it later, that he had agonized over the color, worked on it for weeks, refused my mother's help even though she was on the judging panel because he wanted to win on his own. That specific combination of stubbornness and integrity and complete refusal to take shortcuts was so profoundly him that I had to look away for a moment so he wouldn't see my face. When the results were announced, he picked me up and spun me around right there in the kitchen. I laughed so hard I forgot to be dignified about it. He kissed me about 6 times in a row and didn't seem to notice he was doing it. The ring came a week later. He got down on one knee in our living room. He was wearing the most ordinary clothes, an old sweater, comfortable pants, clearly had not planned the outfit. And he held up a ring and looked at me with that very specific Cashin expression of being completely sincere and slightly terrified simultaneously. He said all the things he had never said out loud before. That he had realized he loved me more every single day. That it had to be me, for the rest of his life. That the flash marriage was an accident, but the life we had built inside it was not. He asked me to marry him properly. The earnest, real kind. I was crying before he finished the sentence. I said yes approximately 4 times while he put the ring on my finger. He told me the ring meant I was locked down and not allowed to run away for the rest of my life. I told him I had been chasing him since I was 17 years old. Running away was not something I had ever considered. Graduation day. The campus where our story began, in the strangest and most complicated and most wonderful way it possibly could have. My mother designed my dress herself, white, crushed pearls, lace that caught the light when I moved. She cried 3 times during the fitting and pretended each time that she wasn't. My father walked me down toward Cashin with the expression of a man who was profoundly happy and also prepared to cause serious problems if necessary. He placed my hand in Cashin's and gave him a look that communicated a full paragraph of fatherly warnings in approximately 2 seconds. Cashin received the look with complete composure and shook his hand. Lucian gave a speech that made the entire room laugh for 5 solid minutes. He recounted the day Cashin called me wife out loud in class. The day they got caught skipping and had to stand outside my office at 8 in the morning looking collectively miserable. He told the whole story with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting for this moment for months. I laughed so hard my face hurt. Cashin looked at me during the ring exchange with the same expression he'd had the night he made me noodles in the studio. Quiet, certain, completely present. He said, "For the rest of our lives, we walk together." The sunlight came through the windows and landed on the floor between us, and I thought, 9 years. 9 years of letters he thought were from someone else, of breakfasts delivered by the wrong hands, of carrying something so carefully for so long that I had almost convinced myself it was enough just to carry it. And then I stopped carrying it, and I put it down right here, in his hands, and it turned out he had been picking it up piece by piece for months, without either of us quite realizing it. People still ask me sometimes how we ended up together. The flash marriage, the student-teacher situation, the whole chaotic, ridiculous, improbable sequence of events that somehow added up to a life. I tell them the truth. I tell them that love is not always lightning. Sometimes it's a Tuesday night and someone gets up to make you noodles without being asked. Sometimes it's an argument about homework, grades, and barbecue, and a locked bedroom door that opens an hour later. Sometimes it's finding out the letters you kept for 9 years were written by the person sleeping next to you. The slow kind of love, the kind that builds itself out of small moments and stubborn arguments and somebody learning exactly how you take your noodles, that kind is terrifying in ways the lightning strike kind never is. Because the lightning strike kind happens to you. But the slow kind? You choose it. Every single day. You choose it in the kitchen at 8 o'clock in the morning. You choose it in the studio at midnight. You choose it at the dinner table and on the way home from school and in every tiny ordinary moment that adds up, eventually, to everything. I married a stranger. And somewhere between the flash marriage certificate and the gold award painting and the ring he put on my finger in our living room, I fell completely, permanently, irreversibly in love with my husband. I hope you choose your person too. And I hope they make really good noodles.